Hey guys, it's Howard. Uncle Howie's podcast. I think this is number 6 or 7. I don't know. I'm going to try to do at least one a week, plus occasionally an extra interview with another man who might want to speak into our lives about how we can be better men. And really, our goal is just to help young men and even some older men make decisions that are going to have a positive impact on themselves and on the people around them. And so I think there's a lot of people who are just in a rut. They are settled, they're content to some degree, and they're not really making any effort to improve things. They're not trying to make any extra money. They're not trying to volunteer any time. They're not necessarily looking into their health or their spiritual condition, and they're just sort of cruising along. And this is kind of an alarm for those people. I want to, not necessarily shake you up, but I want to wake you up and help you make some decisions. And even if it's just, as they say, baby steps in the right direction, every man can do things in their lives to make themselves more valuable to the people that they love, the people who have been put into your life, that you can serve them. Whether they can ever serve you or pay you back isn't always relevant. And so, listen, I know that there are very important transactional relationships. There are clients and salespeople and customers, and what I'm talking about is your marriage or your children, or maybe the younger men in your life that look up to you. And so there's a way for us to serve the people around us, and it kind of starts with taking really good care of ourselves. And I'll be the first to admit, I have not always taken very good care of myself, and have struggled with that for a number of reasons. I've gone through seasons of laziness, and I've gone through times of deep sadness and depression. But I've just always sort of come out of that stuff and decided, I'm going to take the next step in my life. I'm going to go make more money so that the people who are depending on my income to live and thrive will have more than I had when I was a kid. I'm going to go and organize my time better so that the people who I work with, and the people especially who work for me, that their lives can be better without necessarily having to make all the sacrifices themselves. And, especially right now, my wife and I talk quite a bit about health-related things, and we've made some really positive fitness and dietary decisions recently that are, they're getting results, and I'm pretty happy with that. And I'm really proud of my wife. I'm proud of myself, and I'm not trying to become Arnold Schwarzenegger or an Olympic athlete. I'm never going to get back in the ring and box. I'm never going to do MMA. I'm never going to play rugby again. I'm way too old for all that stuff. But if I live to be 80 or 90 years old, I want to be able to get up and walk into the bathroom without needing a nurse, and I want to be able to tie my own shoes. And, if I fell down, I don't want to break my hip as I get older. And so, all of those things, whether it's, having to wear a diaper or need a nurse or tragically be bedridden in your old age, a lot of that has to do with how you take care of yourself when you're in your 40s and 50s and 60s. And so, I just decided that was an area in my life that I wanted to be a better man. And so today's show, here it is 4 minutes in, and I'm getting to the point. Today's show is actually about one of the key factors of taking care of ourselves so that we have the power and the flexibility and the mindset to take care of other people. And so if we want to be a better man, we need to work on our self-worth. I can imagine you grew up in a house like mine where there was some name calling. There was a lot of questioning about talent or intelligence. I struggled a lot as a kid with self-worth because of, my environment was full of, violence and drugs and alcohol and pornography on the coffee table. I mean, I grew up in a pretty pagan home, and my first hope of seeing someone with a really solid, healthy self-worth was my foster dad when I was 12, almost 13 years old when I moved into his house. And, Fred was not a perfect man, but man, he was a really good role model of someone who knew that he brought value to the table, and he showed me every day what it meant to take care of other people, to include his wife and his 2 children, Josh and Rebecca, who are, my brother and sister, and 12 foster teenage boys at a time. Man, him and his wife, Fred and Pat Kinslow, are 2 of the biggest heroes on the planet. Fred passed away. Pat is still alive back in Texas, and I love them, and I think I would either be dead or in prison if it weren't for them. And so I want to dedicate this show to my foster parents, Pat and Fred, and let's kick it off. So I know some guys who have, they got money, they have high positions, and I feel like they get into bed every night and they see themselves, they think of themselves as pretty much worthless, and they have they drive nice cars, and they have jobs that most people would envy. But when they're all by themselves, what they think of themselves, and this is really obvious by some of the other decisions that I've seen them make, what they think of themselves is they don't think highly of themselves. And they don't think they're worth much, and therefore sometimes miss the chance to bring value into other relationships, and bring value into certain circumstances, where they could be bringing value. They miss those opportunities, and so a lot of times people get confused between self-worth and self-esteem. And I'm not saying look it up in the dictionary, but to my heart, self-esteem is sort of the confidence to get stuff done. It's like, when I was in the Army, there were things that I just knew I could do better than most guys, and so whether it was weapons or violence or, whatever it was, protecting someone, those are some things that I felt like I was just born to do. I was really good at that stuff, and so it was exciting for me to have a job where, I didn't have to work super hard to prove myself in an arena where you get promoted pretty much based on your merit. There was no there was no quota for promotion. There was no promotion based on favoritism back in those days. And so when I made sergeant, when I got my 3 stripes and I was made a sergeant pretty young, I think it was right before my 20th birthday. And so, it was before my 20th birthday. And I had been in the Army less than 2 years. So I went from recruit to private first class to E4, which is either corporal or specialist. And then I made sergeant in less than 2 years. And we were not in combat at the time. And so for a non-combatant enlisted man to go from E1, recruit, to E5 sergeant in less than 2 years is pretty miraculous. You gotta do really well on several tests, and you have to get recommended by people who are not likely to give their recommendations lightly. And so it's really a privilege and an honor. And it just, my self-esteem was fantastic. I was getting paid. I was doing a job that I loved, and I was really good at it. I got invited to amazing, elite level schools. And as a matter of fact, I even turned down some of those courses because I didn't think that I was going to make a career out of the military. So it didn't make sense for me to go eat the dust and drink the sweat and shed the blood and tears that it would take to go through some of these schools they offered me. But just being offered an opportunity for a tryout for some of the teams that I was offered, it was a privilege. It was really amazing. And so, yes, I served our country, but man, let me tell you, the Army served Uncle Howie. It really helped me figure out so much about who I am and really why I believe I'm here. My calling was not sure when I enlisted at the age of 17. And by the time I got out, I did 5 years of military service. By the time I got out of the Army, I was 100% confident of what my calling is. And, I started working on it. I started taking steps to be a better man. And one of the things that always seemed to get in my way, one of my biggest ongoing, agonizing struggles, was this idea of self-worth, because I was so good at my job. I was really good at taking the tests. I was really good at so many things. I got promoted faster than anyone I knew at the time in the Army. I didn't know another guy who was an E5 who made it in less than 2 years. I got one badge that I literally only saw on another man's chest one other time in the Army. So I know thousands of soldiers. I've been up and down the halls of the Pentagon. I've been all over the world with the military, and I've literally only seen one other dude ever who had the same badge that I had, and it was a badge you have to earn over a long period of time. And so, I always felt like I really brought something to the table, professionally and militarily and tactically and just, emotional leadership wise. I'm a good coach. And so I just thought, man, I got so much going for me, and yet when I was alone at night, just like the rich guy I told you about earlier, I just didn't feel like I was worth very much. And a lot of that had to do with, with my upbringing, with some woundedness that I carried with me, since I was 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. And, growing up with a single mom and an older brother who was a little rough, to say the least. And believe me, I love my brothers. I would take a bullet for either one of my two brothers. But, my little brother was sort of privileged and spoiled growing up. And my older brother was a maniac and very dominant. And I was just stuck in the middle. And I just didn't feel like in my family, upbringing, that anybody ever told me that I was worth anything. And so here I am, flash forward 10, 15, 20 years later. And here I am, a young man working hard on skills and education and, plugging away at my college degree, going to night school, doing all these things to improve myself and my financial ability and my work ability and my family life, when I got married pretty young. And yet I still went to bed every night and thought, I'm worth a bag of poop. I am worthless. I have no worth. And I would look in the mirror and literally feel like embarrassed. I'd be embarrassed because I had these feelings that I couldn't overcome. I couldn't stop the feeling of worthlessness. And so when we place a value on who we are and what we offer, it's powerful, And I wish I could blame my mom or blame my stepdad or blame my brother. I can't blame these people for my self-worth, because really, it's a choice that we make. We decide and determine what we're worth. And so I want to just talk today kind of quickly about 5 ways that we can work together and on our own to increase our self-worth. Number 1, 5 steps. Number 1, investment in a mentor relationship. Find a man who knows his value and ask him for a weekly check-in appointment. That's it. And you can do this over Zoom or Google Meet or Facebook Messenger app, whatever. If you can't find someone local, someone over the phone is better than no one at all. And I actually have mentored quite a few men who've moved away, or the Army moved them away, or the Navy moved them away, and I've kept into some mentoring relationships with guys over long distances. But it's so much better when you can get together once a week and crack open that, Dr. Pepper, or drink that cup of coffee together. If you're not a Baptist, you can even have a beer. But what happens in those meetings is that the older brother, the wiser older man who has some self-worth, can really help the younger man see the truth and filter out the nonsense, a lot of which comes from, what I call family of origin. And so, I'm not putting down your mama. I am not putting down your brothers and sisters. I'm not telling you, to detach or to disintegrate the bonds you have with your family. What I'm saying is that if as a child you were taught that you're worthless, you're a piece of crap, if that's what you heard, in my family, my mom was a scientist, and both of my brothers are much smarter than me, and high IQ, super logical. And here I come along, and I'm like this, poetic, artistic. I draw, I make words rhyme. I wasn't very good at fighting. Until I was 12, man, I was just a mess. And I heard about it all the time. And the big insult in my family was, "You're not being logical." And every time I heard that from my brother or my mother, it was crushing. And I grew up pretty much crushed because I heard that a lot. Why are you crying? You're not being logical. And all I heard was, "You don't fit in. You're not really part of us. We love you, but we kind of have to. Kind of wish we didn't have to." That's what I felt growing up. And so I had to learn how to separate myself from my family of origin. And the good news is that later I became really close friends with my older brother, and my mother and I actually reconciled quite well when she was in her 60s, like about her last 7 years. We started traveling together and hanging out quite a bit, and we got really close once I worked on the things that were really obstacles from my past. And so number one, get a mentor. Number two, make a list of positive men and hang around those positive men. Stop hanging out with users. Stop hanging out with losers. Stop spending time with addicts, alcoholics, men who waste their lives in front of a television 6 hours a day. Look, don't hang out with guys like that. Find some positive men and start hanging out with them. Number one, get a mentor. Find someone whose life, there's pieces of it you want, and ask them for a weekly appointment. And then in your chill time, whatever your hobbies are, it's better to go play basketball with positive guys who suck at basketball than to hang out at a park or in a gym playing basketball with guys who are great at the sport, but they suck at life. Because unless you're going to be a professional basketball player, playing basketball isn't going to pay your bills. But you show me the 5 guys you hang out with the most, and I can tell you what your limits are. And I'm not kidding. If I get to know you and the 5 men that you actually spend the most time with, and I can pretty much accurately assess how far you're going to go in life. Because you ain't never going to go further than the 5 men you spend the most time with. Never. And so if you're hanging out with guys that are keeping you down, you don't have to be mean about it. Just find someone else to hang out with and start hanging out with people who are going places that you want to go. People who talk positive and think positive. People who read. Yeah. I'm telling you right now, if I had a friend that spent 5 or 6 hours a day in front of a television, I wouldn't spend much time with that guy. Number 3, find a couple of people that you can help with no strings attached. No money. Let me give you an example. There's a single mom in your neighborhood and her yard looks like trash. Just go mow the grass. Mow it, weed it, pick up some garbage, throw it away. You don't even have to, get a thank you. I don't care if she thanks you. Certainly don't take any money from her. Go help someone who can't pay you back with no strings attached. And get in the habit of doing that. An old lady in your neighborhood and her front porch is all, jagged and ugly or whatever. Ask her, go there with some sandpaper and prep it up, put some primer on that wood and paint it for her. And if you can afford to buy the paint, buy the paint. If you can't, ask her to buy the supplies and do the labor. But tell her you don't need to be paid, and you don't need a thank you, and you don't need a pat on the head, and you don't need her to cook any food. Do something for someone on a regular basis who is never going to be able to pay you back. This will raise your self-worth. Trust me. When you start making investments in people who have less than you, your self-worth will just naturally start to rise, especially with no strings attached. That is so big. Number 4, stop eating all day. Ooh, man, this is a hard one for me. I mean, you can tell I'm a big boy. I am a foodie. I used to weigh more than 100 pounds over what I weigh today. So, like right now, I weigh 270 something. I used to weigh 385 pounds. And when I was struggling with depression, I I had lost some people that were very close to me, people I thought I would have the rest of my life, people who had made vows and promises to me and broke those vows and promises. And this somehow, it was all my fault. And, it wasn't just the romance and the person who I thought I would spend the rest of my life with, but it was also the kids. They just quit talking to me, and I think it's natural for kids to take their mother's side, and I don't have a problem with that. But I mean, they cut me off 100%, and it was crushing. I didn't know how long that might last. I didn't have a plan for that in my life, and it was devastating. And I just, I didn't work out. I was just eating all day. And so let me just read this for you. It says, stop eating all day. Pleasures are the enemy of goal setting. Eat 2 meals a day in a 5-hour window, which leaves 19 hours to heal and to digest. And I don't just mean for your body to heal. I mean for your mind to heal. So, you have a 19-hour window where you will not put a bite of food in your mouth. That includes like milk in your coffee. So you can have tea with no sugar. You can have black coffee with no sugar. You can have water. That's it. Nothing, no sodas, no calories for 19 hours a day. And you can get all the food you need in a 5-hour window every day for the rest of your life. And so let me tell you some things to look up on the Wi-Fi. Go on the internet and type in intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting. Type in OMAD, OMAD, which is short for 1 meal a day. Self-denial is actually a key to healthy self-worth. And so stop eating all day. Number 5, we're almost done here. Ask 3 of the most important people that you love, people that you actually need. Ask 3 people in your life that you would say, yeah, I need these people in my life. People you love, people you need. Ask 3 of them to give you brutally honest feedback about the top 3 changes they think that you should make. If you have an alcoholic or an abusive person that you love and you need, don't ask their advice. Find someone else to get your feedback from. I'm not saying, if your father's an alcoholic or your mother is an abusive person, I'm not saying abandon them. I'm just saying don't get advice from them. Now, set your goals into action by taking our 3 steps. Every episode, we talk about the 3 steps. Declare your goals by putting them on paper. Number 2, share your written list with some people that care about you. And then 3, ask for help. That mentor in your life. Say, hey man, here's 4 goals that I'm working on to improve my self-worth. These are the things that I'm pledging to do. I'm declaring this, and I want you to hold me accountable. If you want to be a better man, you have to work on your self-worth. It is a mindset. You determine your values. You can tell me, what are the things you value the most? When people ask me, Howard, Uncle Howie, what's your values? I say my top 3 values are loyalty, clarity, and risk-taking. Those are the kind of people I like. I like people who are loyal. I like people who are clear. And I like people who take risks. And so those are my 3 top values. And it's not that I don't care what your 3 values are. I just, I don't need to influence what your 3 values are. You figure out, you decide what are your values. Put that in writing and share that with your mentor. But, you not only decide what your values are, but you also determine your value. When you tell yourself in the mirror that you're not worth anything or that you're a piece of crap, and I know a lot of young men that grew up in broken homes think that of themselves. And my friends, that is what I thought of myself for a long time. And it took a lot of input from other men, wise, mostly older, although a couple of younger men. And I spent about 2 hours on the phone with my buddy Austin. He was a major in the Army. Now he's a colonel in the Army, and he's about to retire. So he's old. And Austin's a bit younger than me, and we worked together for 2 years. And man, let me tell you, I don't think there's another man on the planet that I admire as much as him. And I'm quite a bit older than him, but when I need some wisdom or input or accountability, he's one of the main dudes I go to because I just know who he is. And he's one of the main guys that ever kind of taught me and modeled for me what our identity means and how important it is. Listen, I'm going to be here every week to encourage and instruct, but you need a local mentor who's more than just a role model. Change as much of your environment as you can. You can do this. You can do the work. You might struggle, but don't give up. Someone somewhere needs you to grow. Someone who's not even born yet may really need you to focus on becoming a better man. And so do the work, and let me encourage you. Step by step, we're going to get this done. And so if you know young men, especially young men that grew up without a strong father figure, send them to episode 1 and tell them to watch a couple of episodes. And since I'm not available to talk to thousands of people, ask them to discuss the content of the video with you, and you guys hash it out.